I'm Nancy Horowitz. I'm the director of the Elie Wiesel Center for Jewish Studies. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the lecture this evening. We're going to start, however, with a few words from Nancy Grodin.
I hope those of you here in person today will indulge me if I repeat my brief comments a few minutes ago when we dedicated the library. I'm doing this because much family and friends are Zooming in from all over the country. I know that's hard to believe, but relatives are in Florida, in New York City, and Michael's sister and family are all in California. So, okay, almost 15 years ago, we celebrated Michael's 60th birthday in this building with a Learn and Lunch event, and many of the people watching on Zoom were there. It was quite a fitting program. And similarly, this library turned out to be the best possible memorial for Michael. I just want to say, I didn't realize that was going to be recorded because the comments of everyone else were really so appropriate and so fitting. Out of all the aspects of his work, he really loved teaching. He often told me that if he could continue teaching in some capacity, even as he became more constrained because of illness, he would be fine. Our family feels that if on occasion one student grabs onto one of those books and is engaged and motivated, Michael's legacy continues. Michael passed away in March 2003, unaware of the great challenges we face today. I wish I had been a better student of my husband's teachings and wisdom, but often life got in the way. What would Michael say, do, or think about the world today? I and others, many of them Zooming in, often ask that question. I don't know exactly what he would say or do, but I imagine it would be very deeply thought through within a framework of spirituality, empathy, honesty, and compassion. I thanked everyone downstairs whose efforts made this library possible, from Hillel, and also to Nancy and the Elie Wiesel Center for the first of many, I hope, annual memorial lectures, and I want to welcome Professor Klugman, who Nancy will now introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, very much. I'm going to say a few more words about Michael than what I said downstairs. We're upstairs, right? Downstairs. He was an internationally recognized authority on medicine during the Holocaust, and served as the medical ethicist at Boston Medical Center, as well as Human Studies Chairman for the Department of Health and Hospitals of the City of Boston. This is to show his incredible career trajectory, which encompasses so many fields and so many interests. He was so deeply involved in medical ethics from many standpoints. Just a few examples: he was also a member of the Ethics Review Board of Physicians for Human Rights, and a consultant on many other advisory boards regarding AIDS, organ transplants, and human subjects. Named one of America's top physicians 4 times, he received 4 National Humanism in Medicine and Humanitarian Awards for integrity, clinical excellence, and compassion. Outstanding humanism in medicine and integrity as a faculty member, and finally, compassion, empathy, respect, and cultural sensitivity in the delivery of care to patients and their families. He was the co-founder of a very important group, Global Lawyers and Physicians Working Together for Human Rights, the co-director of the Boston Center for Refugee Health and Human Rights, caring for survivors of torture. In fact, he learned acupuncture in order to be able to help those patients more. He received a special citation from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in recognition of his profound contributions to Holocaust education and remembrance. His primary areas of interest included the relationship of health and human rights, medicine and the Holocaust, and Jewish bioethics. I could say a lot more about him. He published many books. He edited quite a few others. He published over 200 journal essays, was extremely active in so many different fields that he made intersect in really creative and brilliant ways. He's deeply missed. This goes without saying, both at Boston University and at the Elie Wiesel Center, but also globally, because of the work he was doing internationally as well. we're very honored to dedicate this memorial lecture, which will not be, it is the first, it will not be the last, in his name. And I want to say one more thing about him, a little more personally, which is that back when I met Michael many decades ago, basically, worked with him on various committees and the Jewish Cultural Endowment, etc., he would always say, when the topic of a provocative or difficult speaker or topic would come up, he would always say, let's do it. Let's hear the differences of opinion. We're a university. We should be discussing difference. And I've always remembered that, and I'm still using that kind of motto today. Let me now introduce our distinguished guest. Craig Klugman, Ph.D., is Vincent DePaul Professor of Bioethics and Health Humanities at DePaul University, where he co-directs the Bioethics and Society minor program and serves as director of the Pathway Honors Program. Dr. Klugman also serves on the Ethics Committee at Northwestern University Hospital, is co-founder of the Health Humanities Consortium, and is a voting member of the National Biodefense Science Board. He's the editor of several books, including Research Methods in the Health Humanities, Medical Ethics, and Ethical Issues in Rural Health. His writing has appeared in numerous academic journals and other publications, including the Chicago Tribune, Medium, U.S. News and World Report, and The Hill. He's a recipient of the 2023 Health Humanities Consortium Lifetime Achievement and Service Award. His work, as I think you're about to hear, embodies the core values of Michael Grodin's work: a strong interest in the relationship between Jewish ethics, history, and medicine, and a willingness to go beyond typical disciplines and look at deep connections. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Klugman.
I was going to start by making a joke that I should change my name so that you had Nancy, Nancy, and Nancy. But that's my mother's name, so I can't take that one. Thank you, Nancy and Nancy, for this very warm welcome. I am honored to be here today. This talk comes at an auspicious time. We are halfway between a memorial celebration of social justice on MLK Day on Monday and a remembrance of one of the greatest horrors of human history on Tuesday's International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As we shall soon see, both are under threat. I need to also take a moment to thank my hosts for my time here in Boston. I'm here for 2 weeks as a visiting professor at the Center for Health Humanities at the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. Thank you. I'm going to begin this talk by telling you 3 different stories of Jewish bioethics, the Golem, and artificial intelligence. Don't worry if they don't connect yet. We'll get there. We're going to start by looking at Jewish bioethics. Like all bioethicists, I have to start with definitions, so I'm sure we're all talking about the same thing. Bioethics is the study of how people make decisions regarding right and wrong in medicine, healthcare, health research, and biotechnology. As Dr. Michael Grodin has said, all medical ethics is really influenced by the Holocaust. In fact, many historians of bioethics place the beginning of modern bioethics with the end of the Shoah, especially with the doctor's trial in Nuremberg. The recently Oscar-nominated film, but I have to say it was nominated for Best Score and Best Makeup. Not the reason I go to the movie, but some might. Shows the story behind the first trial ever in human history for conspiracy, crimes against peace, and crimes against humanity. This was the first of 13 trials that were held in the Palace of Justice. As the film depicts, the Nazi leaders were tried publicly for their role in empire building and mass murder. However, when putting together their case, what prosecutors quickly realized that there was no international law against any of those actions. The third trial of the 13 was against the Nazi doctors. In preparing for the doctors' trials, American doctors Leo Alexander, who was Jewish, and Andrew Ivy, who was not, wrote what we now call the Nuremberg Code to have something against which to charge these perpetrators. In reading his verdict, Judge Harold Sebring brought that code into international law. Among the 10 statements of the code are principles such as necessity for the patient or subject's consent, that all efforts must be made to protect the life and health of the subject, and that the risk should never outweigh the benefits. This code was the first time that notions of medical ethics moves from a professional code to having the force of law. Bioethics origins, as Dr. Michael Grodin tells us, are located with theologians, because for most of human history, ethics has been a question of religion. But in the mid-20th century, after the Holocaust, after the Nazi destruction of Europe, the field becomes quickly dominated by philosophers. And medical ethics becomes an exercise in secularization, in finding notions of right action, not in reference to a deity or eternal reward, but in reference to human rights and human nature. It is more American Medical Association Code of Ethics than Moses Maimonides, more for principles of bioethics, autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice, than Augustine and Aquinas. One of the major differences between modern secular bioethics and Jewish bioethics is that the former can be theoretical, focused on professions and institutions, whereas Jewish bioethics is concerned with application to current individual patients or subjects. For example, in Reformed and conservative branches of Judaism, organ donation is often permitted if the beneficiary is a single identifiable person. But only in Reformed strains is the organ allowed to be a gift to humanity or go to a nameless patient. And we'll get to the reason for that in a few moments. Whereas secular bioethics draws on codes, human rights, and philosophical theories, Jewish medical ethics draws from the Torah, the Talmud, and the responsa of the rabbis. It holds that life is a loaned gift from God, and thus we have an obligation to take care of it by seeking medical care when needed, preventing injury and sickness, and protecting human life. Okay. The second story I'm going to tell is that of the Golem of Prague. In the 16th century, the Jews of Prague were being attacked by soldiers night after night in a pogrom. The Jews could not defend themselves from the better armed assailants. I should have mentioned this is a graphically illustrated story. Wanting to help his congregants, Rabbi Judah Loew, known as the Maharal of Prague, and Maharal is an abbreviation of his initials, he goes down to the Vitlavia River and he forms a giant man out of mud. Drawing on his study of Kabbalah, he carves 3 Hebrew letters, Aleph, Mem, and Tav. Sorry, I can't read my own writing. Into the forehead of his creation. In AI language, he may have been the first coder of an AI algorithm. Those letters spell emet, or truth in Hebrew. When he finished, the creature opened his eye, and the rabbi told the golem that his only job is to protect the Jewish people. The creature attacked the attackers, and he kept the Jews safe. However, depending on the version of the story, the attacks either ceased, and the protection was no longer necessary, or the golem becomes violent and destructive. Pick your choice. In both cases, when its work was done, Rabbi Loew erased the Aleph, leaving only the Mem and the Tav, forming the Hebrew word met, or death. The golem collapsed back into mud, lifeless. The rabbi gathered together all of the mud, and he brought it to the attic of the Alta Nushul, the old new synagogue, available again if the Jews should ever need protection. Supposedly, it's still there to this day. So, did you like the graphic novelization? Did you like the images? Entertaining? Fun? Okay. I'm actually not that great an artist. So please give your thanks to the AI, mostly Google Gemini, whom I fed in parts of the story, and it produced these images. In fact, 95% of the images that you're going to see were created by an AI. It seemed appropriate. I probably destroyed a small village somewhere for this. So this leads me to my next and third story. What is AI? Keep using this term. So let's first look at what is an AI, how does an AI work? What is it? What does it do? Okay. So an AI, according to IBM, which is the company that actually created these, is a technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision making, creativity, and autonomy. But I think that as we have learned, they do not do this. They do not emulate human thinking. And as we're going to show, they think very differently from us. And that can be of concern. John McCarthy, who's a Stanford professor and the father of AI, called it the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. They may be more intelligent than us, they may be less, but they have an intelligence that is all their own. And you'll see the reference to Ex Machina, which was an amazing and disturbing science fiction movie that dealt with the concept of AIs not being able to understand human beings and the humans attaching emotions and relationships to them, that because they're not capable of empathy, they can never return. And in the end, destroy their own creator. That's also the plot of The Terminator, so many other films. Okay, so there are many different kinds of AI, as you can see here. And you've probably heard a lot of these terms, so we'll tease them apart a little bit. Again, I'm a bioethicist. We start by defining our terms. So most of these are what we call deep learning, which means that there are artificial neural networks. They kind of emulate the brain, the way that we have connections. And it's teaching computers how to process data. Okay? There's then machine, so in deep learning, you are giving lots of if-then statements, if this and that. You're trying to get the computer to emulate us. Then there is machine learning, which is the machine, we don't tell the machines how to think or what to think. They figure it out themselves. So you give the machines a bunch of data, and they learn from it, and they improve on it. And without being explicitly programmed, they come up with their own rules. So if you've ever seen, I'm going to date myself here, 1984 movie War Games, right? Do you want to play a game? The purpose for the games was to help the AI to teach itself, like a child taking its first steps or figuring out a puzzle or how to hold a fork. I guess I wouldn't give a child a fork, but maybe a spoon, a little less dangerous. We also have the sort of the new thing that about almost 3 years ago came onto all of our lives with ChatGPT is the large language model. Now, a lot of deep learning and machine learning, you have to code. You have to understand the code, like Rabbi Lowe. And you need to, it's very computer language. It's a foreign language, at least to me. But in large language models, they're using everyday language. It is lay language, it is what we're using most of the time. And they can process it, they can understand it, and they can generate it. Most of you have probably used a version of a large language model. Anybody here use a chatbot? You've used an LLM. Documentation summation. So when you have a Zoom meeting, at the end, it will produce a list of minutes. Like, I don't take minutes anymore. Let the machine figure it out of what's going on. And I'm going to give you some more examples as we go through. It is generating content that can appear to be original and unique. It's not, but it appears that way. And then we have now generative AI. And generative AI is a deep learning machine that generates high-quality text, images, and other content based on the data that they have been trained on. So it appears they are saying something unique. So I was over at the Harvard Medical School library earlier today, and they have a little kiosk. And it's, do you want a story? And you press a button. Do you want a 1 minute, a 5 minute, or 8 minute story? And it will print out a story for you. Some of them exist, but some of them are brand new. And it's generating it brand new. A lot of journals, and especially science fiction magazines, are no longer accepting anybody to submit because they have been so inundated with articles written by AI that they don't have time to get through it all. And yes, this has created a bit of a mess. So these are the different terms you might have heard, and this is their meaning. But essentially, we're doing generative large learning modules today that are built on machine learning, which means we don't understand them because they don't think like us. They think like something else. Okay, so how do you train a large learning model? This is a pun, a visual pun here. If you've ever seen one of the movies, How to Train a Dragon, How to Train Your LLM. Not all the jokes are good. Okay, so first we start by collecting data. We need a whole lot of data to build these things. This is often called scraping. The other term for that is stealing. So you're gathering vast amounts of data from very varied sources, books, articles, websites, computer code, lots of things. And I'm going to show you in a minute where a lot of that has come from. That's first stage. Second stage, you do pre-processing. You clean the data. So anybody who's done research or worked with numbers, you clean the data because there's a lot of noise in there. It's not clean. It doesn't exactly work the way you want. So you clean it up a little bit. Then you have to decide your architecture. And the architecture is, this is the machine learning part of it, the algorithm, the computer code. And we have lots of models that are available. There's a program called Visual Studio. You can pick, you go into that, you import your data set, you import which algorithm you want, ChatGPT, Google Gemini. You can pick any of the ones that are on the market. They're available. And think about this as you've got your content, you're picking the brain, and then you're putting it together. So you've got to choose the architecture on which you're laying things on. And then there's training. But the training really happens really fast, and you're not going to notice it. So that brain you've chosen will learn by processing the data to look for patterns and features, and it's going to create rules for itself. So that little kid will soon learn you don't stab people with forks. Spoons don't stab people at all. I don't know why I'm talking about stabbing. So it will figure those things out just like what a child does, but it's not going to be the same thing we understand because they didn't go through the same experiences that we have. And then there's an evaluation. You can assess how well the AI does work or doesn't work. You can fine-tune it a little bit if it's needed. So that's how we created an LLM. All right, so now that you know what an AI is, let's explore how AIs are currently being used in healthcare, because they're being used everywhere in healthcare. The last time you went to a doctor's office, you may have been asked to sign a consent form for automated scribing. So this was a task that was previously done by the physician, perhaps another healthcare provider, or a student scribe. So a lot of my pre-med students get jobs scribing. They get paid to sit there and kind of observe and write everything down into the chart. I don't know why I'm writing, it's all typing now. So instead of taking notes and making those entries, or if you really you've been to a doctor last year, it's a lot of this. And when did that start? And how does that feel? My mom actually retired as a nurse when she got criticized for not making eye contact. Well, she got criticized for making eye contact with patients and was told she should have spent more time looking at the computer. She's like, I'm done. So in this case, the AI is listening to your conversation. And it is translating that conversation as a note in the chart. It's also sending it to billing. We know from studies that doctors on average spend 2 hours of computer work for every 1 hour they spend with a patient. So you can see a system that would save time and increase accuracy is something desirable and that hospitals and doctors' offices would put money into. Okay. We also use AI in diagnostics, and they're kind of pretty amazing here. Because while our interests flag, your interest might be flagging right now, that's okay. You can yawn, it's fine. While we may need breaks, while we may need sleep or eating, the AI does not. Its attention is always 100% on. So when it comes to reading x-rays, CT scans, MRI results, AIs are as accurate and often more accurate than human eyes in detecting pathologies. An AI can detect pancreatic cancer 438 days earlier than human observation alone. Given that most pancreatic cancer patients have an expected lifespan of about a year, that's significant. An AI is 84% more accurate in diagnosing prostate cancer versus 67% for humans. And in end-of-life care, common question, I'm also a death doula, something else I do. We always get asked, how long? Well, your doctor, your human doctor, is about 25% accurate. We're really terrible at this question. And I only play a doctor on TV. But your AI doctor or assistant is 85% accurate and will tell you what you need to know next, what the next stage is, the next symptoms, and when that's going to happen. So it's pretty impressive in its diagnostics. We now have this development of precision medicine. And so most times when we are applying medicine, we are treating towards a mean, or at least a 95% confidence interval that people will fall within an average population. So this drug will work for most people, but maybe not everyone. But with AI, we can treat each person as an individual based on their specific medical history and genetics. For example, AI can now select just the right treatment for someone with cancer to treat their specific cancer with fewer side effects. Whereas humans, we go like, okay, it looks like this will be good, we'll try it. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. If you don't like the side effects. But an AI can pinpoint it. Drug discovery. So AI can identify new drug targets and predict drug interactions in a fraction of the time, such as identifying inhibitors for cancer-related proteins in 46 days compared to years. AI's AlphaFold, RosettaFold, and EMSFold can predict protein structures and folding to show exactly how molecules will interact with cells and affect them, vastly increasing our discovery of new drugs. In fact, one recently discovered just in the last few weeks is a super antibiotic. And we thought we were out of antibiotics that were going to work. In Silico Medicine Company, they have an AI-designed drug for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or IPF, called, medical terms, rentosertib, it's actually drug terms. It has now moved to phase 3 clinical trials in a brief time. Another drug, REC 2282, is an AI-identified candidate for tumors, and that is also in human phase 2 clinical trials. So it's happening faster and in some cases more creatively. Patient surveillance. You may have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, or you just carry a phone around with you. And it might record your steps, your activity levels, your heart rhythms, maybe the food you eat, maybe you've got a dieting app on there. My nieces track other cycles on theirs. Like, there's a lot of information there. And it provides warnings and encouragement for certain behaviors. You may have an internal pacemaker or an implantable defibrillator that notifies your physician when you have a cardiac event. If you have diabetes, you may have a small patch that records your insulin and your glucose levels. We have smart pills that can track if patients are taking their medication and share that information with a designated monitor. And AI takes all that data and figures out what's going on and figures out how to best work with you and how to make sure and how to alter your behavior so that you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing. And lastly is administration. Perhaps the most frightening of all things, paperwork. One of the greatest success stories with AI is that it more efficiently schedules operating room time. Seems pretty mundane, but it turns out that surgeons overestimate the amount of time they need to do an operation. And an AI can look at an individual doctor's experience doing particular procedures, the average time it takes, the specifics of this patient, the likely complications, and determine more accurately how much time the procedure is going to take, and therefore more efficiently schedule the ORs. You can get more surgeries done in a day by using an AI. It can also take those automated scribe notes we were just talking about and not only fill out the medical record, but it can attach appropriate CPT medical billing codes, send out a medical bill to the insurers and the patients without a human being ever looking at it. So this may explain some of the bills people have been getting. Again, these are the many ways that we are already using AI in our health world. Okay, so here are some of the concerns. Like, that's the way it's being helpful, but here are some of the concerns that I have and many others have about the risks of AI. Okay, so most people believe that as a machine, AI is neutral. But as we've discussed earlier, these algorithms are built on the data scraped from everywhere. And in the case of health AI, that everywhere includes medical records, usually sold by hospitals to tech companies. Any bias that exists in those records is thus reflected in the algorithm. AI has our human biases. For example, it turns out that doctors are more likely to ask black patients if they are using drugs than their white patients. Latine patients are more likely to be screened for diabetes and asked whether they are insured by Medicaid than white patients. Doctors are more likely to express the doubt of a minority patient in expressing what's going on with them and less likely to prescribe pain medication. Being built on that kind of data, the questions we ask and don't ask, AI also asks black patients about their drug use, but not white ones. It asks Latin patients about Medicaid, but not white ones. And if patients of, say, group X are given a cancer treatment less often, and as a result, group X has higher mortality rates, the AI is likely to say, more of group X dies from this cancer, so we shouldn't waste our money and efforts on their care. So we just don't offer treatment to that group. The biases that exist in the medical system are repeated and exaggerated by AI. The result is questions not asked and questions asked inappropriately. AI can be a mirror in which we recognize and see our own biases, or it can produce confirmation bias, where we believe what it says because it says what we believe, even if not based in fact. Second, AI is a large language module, and those work by predicting what the next word might be. Right? It's just stringing together predictions. So in essence, they guess, and they often get it right. But that also means sometimes they get it wrong. We know that AI is built on our biased data sources. And unfortunately, there's more anti-Semitic websites and social media posts than there are positive pages about Jewish people. Both of these facts mean that AI can say things that are wrong and anti-Semitic. And when it does not know a fact, it just makes it up. In other words, AIs are prone to hallucinations. They dream. And they present those delusions as real and true. For example, I have students who turn in papers with reference lists, and everything in the references seems true, looks accurate, viable. I can look up the author and be like, oh yeah, they work on this topic. But it turns out the two people who are listed as authors have never written together. And the title of the article doesn't actually exist. Oh, and wait, and that journal does not exist. But it sounds reasonable until you use critical thinking, until you spend a couple of hours looking things up, and you realize it's just making things up. So the more that AI is exposed to something like anti-Semitism, the more anti-Semitic it will become. The goal of most embedded AIs, like Grok or Copilot, is to keep you using it so that the companies can get more data from you and monetize that data. Or, in the case of ChatGPT, they're going to sell you ads that are related to your conversation. This was announced last week. So they're going to listen to your conversation and then feed you an ad. As I also just said, there is more anti-Semitic content in the world than pro-Jewish information. And in most algorithms, you get more of what you are seeing. So if you see or look for something slightly anti-Semitic, you will get something even more anti-Semitic. And given that these AIs are not necessarily monitored, that means all ideas in AI world are considered equal. There's no editing, no proofreading, no peer review, no fact-checking. All things being considered equal, that means extremist minority voices can often be amplified and widely spread. Conspiracy theories and old anti-Semitic tropes find new and often welcoming audiences. This recent report from the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust has disturbing memes and AI-generated images that draw on anti-Semitic conspiracy theories from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And you can see one example here. I apologize for having it, but it is the least offensive of the ones that are in the report. They're talking about things like Jewish control of the banking world, being motivated for money, and desiring power. This hate speech can not only spread more widely with AI, it can spread faster than ever before. In creating AI, as we discussed, data is placed in an algorithm, and then the system teaches itself to identify the patterns, create its own rules for working. But AIs, like golems, are not self-aware. If you ask an AI how it reached a decision, it can't tell you because it does not know. If you ask a programmer how the AI made a decision, they cannot tell you because they do not know. The AI programs itself. It is a self-learning program. The golem was coded, remember what Rabbi Lowe said, protect the Jewish people. It does not realize when it starts hurting other people. One of the challenges is that no one can ask an AI, why did you create that anti-Semitic meme? Or how did you reach that conclusion about a group of people? You can't ask it why it gave you the answer it does. It doesn't know why it makes its choices. It doesn't know how it makes decisions. So this is the black box problem. And there have been efforts to create second AIs to explain what is going on in a first AI, but we don't know. It's an emulation. It might or might not be accurate. There are also people who are trying to make it a little more transparent, but it's limited. Misinformation. Remember that I titled this talk, The Death of Truth. And it's a reference to the on and off code of the golem, emet and met. But it's also a phrase in its own right. Have we truly reached an era when truth is dead? The first three concerns I've discussed here of algorithmic bias, hallucinations, and amplification lead to a fourth concern, misinformation. Algorithmic bias can spread Holocaust denial. AI may hallucinate facts, misread or create false narratives, and make up evidence. AI often spreads hate speech widely and quickly. And AI oversimplifies history. The algorithms may emphasize well-known events that many people ask about, but omit lesser-known episodes that would provide a richer and deeper understanding and explore more complexity. For example, 60–80% of the top image results for the search term the Holocaust are often pictures just of Auschwitz. And so maybe you start believing there was only one place where these crimes happened. Disinformation. It is possible to manipulate an AI to be more biased on purpose. For instance, deep fake technology allows AI and human actors to manipulate audio and video content. You may have heard that Matthew McConaughey just copyrighted his voice and body to make sure to sue anyone who uses him as a deep fake. You can make any person, living or dead, except Matthew McConaughey, say anything you want, and even show video of them saying it. I actually, for my daughter, I made a birthday video of my cat singing to her happy birthday. Looks pretty real. Then there are bad actors, otherwise known as hackers, who can poison AIs by adding biased information on purpose to the AI, or directly manipulating the algorithm to display certain perspectives more than others. Due to hallucinations or creating a prompt in a creative way can even get around guardrails and pushes the system to devise conspiracy theories, create evidence, air quotes, that support it. And because the AI can work so fast, it can create disinformation much faster then we can discredit it. It overwhelms true and accurate information. For example, AI, according to this report from UNESCO here, is rewriting Holocaust history, giving further space to denial and downplaying the horrors. As I have hinted at in the last section, anti-Semitism is a huge issue with AIs. So is racism and sexism and ableism and more. Several reports have shown a particular problem, however, with anti-Semitism. Recently, like a week ago, Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok drew backlash that began in July 2025 for producing anti-Semitic remarks, including praising Adolf Hitler, accusing Jewish people of anti-white hate, and promoting conspiracy theories. The bot repeatedly drew from unmoderated extremist and racist online sources like 4chan, a biased data set. It led to hallucinations and amplified both mis- and disinformation, and is very hard to correct, even if its owners wanted to correct it. So how do we get to a better AI? Many states have passed AI laws to protect against many of these concerns. In my own state of Illinois, you need permission before collecting any biometric information. Facebook was successfully sued for its feature of automatically identifying any person in an uploaded picture and linking to their profile, even without their consent. I got $4.20 from that settlement. Won't even cover a cup of coffee. Massachusetts also has its own laws on AI data privacy, discrimination, and consumer protections. However, a new executive order seeks to override all of these laws, which we are told suppresses the development of AI technology and its myriad possibilities. So, what would a bioethical golem drawing on Jewish bioethics tell us to do? First, we need to ask the question if we should be using AI in healthcare. Just because we are doing something doesn't mean we should. You can see this little kid here in the bottom corner looks terrified at getting a Band-Aid from Dr. Golem. In Judaism, the preservation of human life, pikuach nefesh, is the highest commandment, overriding almost all other religious laws, the exceptions being adultery and incest. The need for preserving life, however, must be a specific, identifiable individual, back to when I talked about organ donation, not just an abstract or theoretical beneficiary, and the situation must be life-threatening. But this interpretation differs in Orthodox, Conservative, Reformed, and Reconstructionist traditions. Let's suppose that an AI algorithm can detect a tumor more accurately. It can. Or it can predict a cardiac event before it even happens and save a person's life. Then, using that technology is not just an option, it may be a moral imperative under pikuach nefesh because we can save a life. To stand idly by when, cursor's moving around, to stand idly by when life-saving technology is available and not use it, like a vaccine, would be a violation of this ethical duty. So there are conditions where AI would have to be used in a Jewish concept to take care of your health. In some stories of the golem, as I mentioned, it runs amok and kills people. The creature lacks da'at, moral discernment and consciousness, so it cannot be a legal agent. You couldn't blame it, you couldn't sue it, you couldn't hold it accountable. Rabbi Lowe has to end its existence in order to protect people. Lowe must do this and no one else because ultimately it is his creation and thus his responsibility. Jewish law emphasizes that accountability remains with the human. Similarly, AI is a creation that a physician chooses to use or not use, or that the hospital tells the doctor that they must use. Thus, a physician cannot blame a glitch for a wrong diagnosis or treatment option. Ultimately, the human physician must remain the primary trustee of the patient's well-being. And if the AI and the physician differ on what to do, the human must always decide, like Rabbi Lowe. If there is a harm, it is the physician's responsibility. The lost cost fallacy originates in gambling. I kind of looked at this one as like, is this a little anti-Semitic? But it's about gambling here. And when a gambler is down, they'll keep betting more money because they figure at some point the odds have to turn in their favor and they'll start winning. The other way of thinking about this idea is throwing good money after bad. In AI, the technology may be forced upon patients and physicians because the hospital or company has invested millions of dollars in it. And so they are going to get their money out of it. They're going to use it. The Talmud teaches us that, quote, whoever saves a single life is considered to have saved the entire world. And we must think in terms of the common good. Thus, even if a great deal of money were spent, a Jewish ethics perspective says that the life of the patient comes first, not the profit, not the lost cost. And if the AI does not benefit the individual or the community, then it should not be used. We have to be prepared to walk away. Jewish ethics provides two precepts that will help guide us in responsible use of AI that fall also under the secular bioethics notion of privacy, meaning that you can keep things to yourself, or confidentiality, which is whatever you tell your healthcare provider they can't share. This imperative is found in Jewish ethics. Tzenuit means privacy, modesty, and discretion. The second concept is lashon hara, which means literally evil tongue, and is a prohibition against gossip and speaking ill of someone. In secular medical ethics, we talk about privacy, we talk about confidentiality in terms of protecting a patient's secrets and professional conduct. How might these ideas influence our approach to using AI in healthcare? Well, here's a few suggestions. We could require that all data be anonymized so that there's no identifiable information tied to the AI input or output. We already use this condition in much of research. We need to restrict AI from exporting conversations for other purposes, such as selling ads. The AI must be given guardrails that prevent it from sharing individual private information, whether that information can harm someone or even benefit them. And clearly, under lashon hara, it tells us that we need to get a handle on AI hallucination and bias, and that there must be monitoring against mis- and disinformation. Most importantly in bioethics is the first principle of the Nuremberg Code, that the consent of the subject is absolutely essential. Consent requires two things: information and volition. You need to know what it is you are deciding, the process, the pros, the cons, the alternatives. And you must have the freedom to make a choice, free from duress or coercion. Informed consent also requires comprehension. It's not enough that somebody gives you a bunch of information or a 100-page consent form. You need to understand it, and they need to know that you understand it. In terms of AI, these concepts translate to informed consent for one's likeness, content, medical records, and ideas to be scraped as learning material for an AI. It also means that a patient must consent for an AI to be used in their care, which means they need information about how the AI was trained, on which data sets it was trained, and what biases are in those data sets, and how it will be used in their care. So we know that AI companies scraped a lot of people's intellectual property without consent. They just took in order to be able to construct these algorithms. Consider the fact that there are several lawsuits that have been brought by writers against AI companies based on this claim, and the suits are doing well in the courts. And in fact, in preparing this talk, I found that 28 of my own publications have been stolen to train these models. Nancy, they took 7 of yours, I looked. Only 7, sorry. Neither of us were paid for this. Neither of us consented for this. They just took it. In medicine, the term DNR means do not attempt resuscitation, that a patient can choose not to undergo CPR and other procedures if their heart stops. We need to develop a concept of DNAI. Do not use AI on this particular patient to make that a choice. To create the AI, Rabbi Lowe had to carve or code the word emet, or truth, into its forehead. The word emet uses the first, middle, and last words in the Hebrew alphabet, symbolizing that truth extends across the whole world and our whole lives. If we think of the Golem as an AI, an artificial construction, created to protect us, we must also accept that it has the power to hurt us, because as you have seen, that is the truth. The Golem was created with good intent, to protect the Jews of Prague. Recall that there are versions of the story where the Golem goes from helping people to inadvertently and mindlessly hurting them. The Golem lacks reason, rationality, and empathy. It hurts without awareness or moral imagination. Rabbi Lowe must stop his creature by erasing the aleph from its forehead, or in AI parlance, to change the computer code on which the Golem was based. He recodes it. If our AI creation turns out to be more dangerous than helpful, will we be able to pull its plug, recode it? Given that all generative AIs are owned by private companies and individuals, will those owners, like Rabbi Lowe, recode or deactivate their creation? In one version of the Golem story, it is the prince who calls Rabbi Lowe to the palace and asks him to stop the monster from killing his people. The prince is providing oversight when Lowe loses perspective. Will our states and federal government step up to provide oversight and guardrails? Bioethics is often at its best when it raises questions which challenge us to answer. It doesn't necessarily provide the answer. And thus, I will leave you with these final open questions. Thank you. Okay, so we have time for questions, but August will be coming around with the microphone. You must speak in the microphone because we are recording and we are live streaming.
That was really a fascinating talk. Let me ask you a question I would have asked Michael Grodin, who was a good friend. Supposing that the United States and other Western countries adopted the kinds of guardrails that you were suggesting, and enforced those guardrails, and China did not. And as a result, China is able to tap a much larger database of knowledge than Western countries, and they develop medical devices, drugs, weapons systems, manufacturing techniques that are far superior to what we have in the United States. So we have all these protections, and they have all the economics and possibly security benefits, weapons benefits that we do not. So it seems like that's a problematic outcome. How do we, and I suspect one of the reasons why the Trump administration is pushing back against these kinds of state laws that you were talking about is exactly that point. You know? So how do we deal with that problem that if we have these guardrails and Chinese or other folks, Russians don't, then we put ourselves at a significant potential disadvantage?
Very good point, and we could probably have many hours of conversation about this, so I'll try to give a few thoughts very quickly and simply. Well, not simply. So, the Jewish people as people of the book have, the lesson we learn is we try to live morally and ethically, and that often means we don't do the things that those around us do. And yeah, sometimes that's a competitive disadvantage. but we're moral people, we're ethical people, and that's more important. So if your greatest virtue, if your greatest value is economic gain, more advanced weapon systems, then yeah, you should go with this. But if you value human life, common good, then you shouldn't. Now, this is not happening ahistorically. We can look at the example of genetic editing. So in the United States, it is not illegal to genetically edit a human embryo. In a lot of countries it is, in a few states it is. But there is sort of a moratorium among scientists, a voluntary moratorium that we do not do this. There's also no federal funding for it at the moment. But in China, they don't have those limits. And you may remember a number of years ago, maybe almost 10 years ago, that a Dr. He in China actually altered human embryos, implanted them into a woman's uterus for a pregnancy, and she gave birth to twins. And the result was international condemnation. Because in civilized nations, that was a step that people had agreed they wouldn't do. The scientist went to jail and lost his lab. Now, whether that was honest punishment for what he did, or China felt embarrassed and felt they needed to do something, but let him secretly do stuff as well, like, we don't know that. But we have evidence in the past of those sorts of scenarios, and where pressure among civilized states has been effective in pulling things back. But I don't have tea leaves.
Fascinating talk, thank you. So taking into account do no harm, Lashon Hara, right? It is our obligation to not harm another person. A way that we can not harm another person is by, say, getting vaccinated. I don't get COVID, I can't give it to you, you don't die. Then you brought up the point of the first precept of the Nuremberg trials. Patient has to understand what treatment they're getting, and they have to agree to it. So a patient understands, yes, I do not want to get this vaccine, I know exactly what it does, I still say no. Where do we side with that?
That is an age-old conflict between medicine and public health. It was the essential battle of COVID, the lockdown era, right? I wear a mask to protect others when vaccines came out. I'm getting vaccinated to protect others. But at the same time, we need to give people permission. I don't have an easy answer. I think it is a space that we negotiate. And it's really the ethical crux of what's called public health ethics, right? The needs of the community versus the rights of the individual. And where do they come? And you can read my chapter in my book on medical ethics to learn more about my thinking on that topic. But yeah, it is a very real space in which we have to operate. The American Association of Pediatrics says, so when we first started having a lot of vaccine hesitancy, a lot of pediatricians were saying, okay, if you're not vaccinated, you will not be in my practice. Or I'm having a separate waiting room for unvaccinated children in opposite sides of the building so that they don't come in contact. The AAP came out and said, no, we really don't want to do that because we still want kids to get health care and get connected, so we don't really advise doing that. We are, as I said, bioethics is really good at raising answers, and then it kind of struggles with having with the answers. We ask the questions, we don't necessarily have the answers. And I think that's one area that we have struggled with, and will continue to do so. And that's just human. Thank you for the question, though.
So I think that one of the issues with AI is the end of thinking, that AI, is almost by definition, make people dumber, that the more you use Google Maps, the worse your sense of direction, that there is the notion of de-skilling, that there are studies that show that physicians who rely on AI for diagnosis lose their own skills at diagnosing as much as they did. your students give you a paper, the fact that it has references that don't exist means that they weren't thinking, right? They gave you an excellent result without thinking, or a good enough result, right?
Right.
If they are B
They thought.
students or C students without thinking. So the question that I have, since, as I said, what Michael Grodin really enjoyed was thinking, is how do you preserve thinking, right, in the era of being able to get results without thinking?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this question lately because what I'm experiencing in the classroom. Well, I've gotten pretty good at figuring out what an AI-generated paper looks like at this point. And those students get an F. But okay, I spent my lifetime in my education learning to think critically, to engage with text, to question. So when I get the result from an AI, and obviously I use it a lot to generate all these images, I can look at it and go, no, that's not right. So I will say the first round of the Golem, who's really kind of cute in this, the emet on the forehead was not emet. It was some random Hebrew characters, and I had to go in with Photoshop and change it. But I'm bringing in this critical perspective. I understand, I think. My concern that I'm sharing with you is that my students don't. Like, they're coming to school, and instead of doing that thinking and learning those skills, they're just accepting whatever the machine does. They're not even proofreading it. They just accept what it says. And so I am worried about that very same thing. I'm doing an experiment in my class right now where they're not allowed to use AI. Because I think AI's got some good uses and some good spaces. I mean, it's doing some incredible things for research. But I think you have to have those skills of critical use and deep thinking before you can use it well. Because otherwise, you're never going to know what the limitations are. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just not allowing it in my classroom and calling them out when they do. But thank you.
Hi, I'm a lawyer and a legal scholar, and I have a question that relates to my own familiarity and work in terms of the legal doctrine of informed consent, which of course could differ from the ethical concepts. But in terms of law, the informed consent doctrine does not apply across the board to medical care. It's limited primarily to physical contact. So that if you operate on a patient or you give them a vaccine, you're going to jab them in the arm, you have to get their informed consent. It doesn't apply to, let's say, the doctor's choice of which antibiotic to prescribe. All right, doctors have no obligation to inform patients that, you know, there's X number and here's why I choose this one, you know, so many, there's no obligation. And part of the reason for that is professional autonomy. So to the extent that you require informed consent for every single judgment that a physician makes, you know, you're taking away from their autonomy as to, I prescribe this antibiotic, this is what I think is best, I'm not going to give you the option, I'm not going to prescribe something else. So I wonder what the, it just seems to me it's complicated to say you can't, you know, doctors shouldn't be able to use AI without a patient's consent. I think it has to, you know, be more circumscribed, and there has to be a lot more nuance in terms of at what points you have to inform them about, you know, what the options are.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. One of the arguments I read talked about how you don't get to choose which electronic health record system your doctor uses, right? You don't get to choose what kind of stethoscope they're using on you. There's probably a very relevant reason to know what antibiotic they're prescribing. Maybe you have an allergy to it, or maybe you've had a past experience. So there is definitely a place where the more you speak with your physician, the better the care will be, and the better the satisfaction score for your physician, which is what many people care about now because of federal incentives. So we have to draw a line, like what decisions do you get to be part of and what do you not. This is similar to cases that we've had where people come from certain cultures where maybe you don't get care from somebody of a different sex than you. And can you request that? Or you might have a bias where you prefer somebody of a particular ethnicity or not of a particular ethnicity. And so these are spaces, there's no legal answer to these in many cases. So we have to negotiate these places, and each institution has to kind of figure out its own guidelines. But yeah, this is the gray. This is what we have to figure out. Do you have a right to know that your doctor's using an AI? On what AI? I want to know, but I'm probably going to ask. But if I don't know, do I not ask? Now, I think if the machine is collecting information about you and the hospital is selling it, like right now when hospitals sell these records, they don't inform their patients. There's no requirement. I think there should be, because they are getting monetary reward for this and we're getting nothing, and we are potentially losing privacy. Now, you could argue these are anonymized records, but MIT has done a number of studies that shows it doesn't take very long to figure out, re-identify these anonymized records. It's pretty simple using publicly available information. So I'm going to suggest with AI, with the risk potentially so high, that we might want to think about having stronger standards, and I would love to chat with you more. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
I am an engineer, and my question to you is, how do we separate the good data from the bad data? Because basically the machine collects everything that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the way we had the intelligence to develop and create a system to collect the data, we need to create a system that basically learns how to separate what's real and what's not. There are all kinds of algorithms and all kinds of equations that can be, I don't know, developed, applied, and basically starting to use common sense, which the machine doesn't have.
Right.
So when you train your students or you talk to them or even you talk to your patients, basically we should never forget to establish a level of conversation and establish common sense. Without that, nothing can happen. Machine collects. And if we do not publish and if we do not exchange all our ideas, all these things would not happen. But if we forget the basic thing, how to communicate with each other, then everything is lost, doesn't have any value.
Thank you. Very, very good words.
I think we have time for one more question if there is one.
Thank you so much for that talk. I wanted to ask you about scraping. So well before the advent of scraping in the digital world, I'm aware that the different cities around the world have been assessing sewage in an effort to find where communicable disease is developing and how to get ahead of it. I don't know that anybody ever gave permission for their data to be used in this way, but it is, the way that you've described it, it is a form of scraping. What I'm wondering is, could this be a generational issue that we might be concerned with something that later generations are going to say, it's well worth it. All the data that's out there is beneficial to all of us, to our health, and we should just suck it up. Can an argument be made that this is more of like a moral panic and that the good is going to outweigh the bad in developing, good habits and good hygiene?
So I'm going to agree with you a little bit and disagree with you a little bit. The part I'm going to agree with you on is I think younger generations, when I talk to people in Gen Z and Gen A, no, privacy is not something that they consider as existing. They assume they are being recorded every moment of every day. And to me, it's sad that even in their relationships, their closest relationships, they're never their true self. I've had them tell me this, they're never their true selves. They assume they're always on. And so the only time they can be themselves is when they're alone. So yes, I think expectations, privacy, and confidentiality are probably going to go down in future generations. I will disagree with, and I hope I'm getting this right, I'm asking my legal colleague about this, that there is a big difference between wastewater surveillance and the ideas, my 28 papers, which is that wastewater is garbage, it's refuse. And once it leaves your home, refuse is a public good. It's no longer yours. So when we do surveillance, we don't need to get permission because you don't own it. I have intellectual property on those 28 papers that I never gave away. They were not garbage. They were published, in reputable journals, I hope reputable journals, with copyrights signed. And so I think there's a big difference there in your analogy. So that's where I'll disagree with you. To be clear, I was not comparing. No, I got it. No, got it. But yeah, so I say yes and no. Thank you.